Blender has a really cool modifier called the Skin modifier, and what it does is it creates a skin of mesh around vertex points and edges. So for instance, with this cube selected here, if I were to press tab to go into edit mode, and then press M to bring up my merge menu, and then select at center to merge all the vertex points in this selection to the center to one vertex point. So there's a point there, and then if we shift scroll down to do vertex selection, and then press E to extrude. So now we just have this two vertex points connected by an edge. So if I press tab to go back into object mode, and under add modifier, we add a skin modifier, then we see this box dynamically generated around the edge there. So if we press tab to go into edit mode, and down here, there's this limit selection divisible button. We want to turn that off so we can actually see the edges and vertex points from which this modifier is generating this mesh, so we can see that to actually work with that. But if we were to click on a point here and say press E to extrude again, you see as we do that, mesh is generated from around these vertex points, which is really cool. So what would be neat is if we had a subsurface modifier on top of all this to make it look smoother. So if we press tab to go back into object mode and tap W, which adds a subsurface modifier, and we could tap it again to increase that subsurf level there. Tap it one more time, increase it to 3 levels. Normally when you tap W to add a subsurface modifier in smoothing, it will smooth your object. But if you're using a skin modifier, you have to manually select this smooth shading option here in the skin modifier. So now if we were to press tab to go back into edit mode, we have this really nice kind of mesh creation tool. So we can also press S to scale these points, and you'll see as we do, it works different than when just scaling a regular vertex point. So for instance, if I were to press tab, go back into object mode here, double right click over here, and add a, let's say a torus shape, press tab to go into edit mode, shift scroll down for vertex selection and select one of these vertex points. If we press S here, it doesn't really do anything, but when we scale the vertex points or edges with an object with a skin modifier on it, then it will change the shape. So if I press tab to go back into object mode, press X to delete that, and then click back on our object with the skin modifier and subsurface modifier, press tab to go into edit mode, we can scale one or multiple of these points here. Because this is a kind of complex geometric process, like occasionally you'll get kind of like ripping in places like this, so sometimes you just kind of have to work with it, just scaling and moving these vertex points around to kind of get the shapes you're looking for. Okay, so wouldn't it be cool if we had a tool which did all that prep work for us so we could immediately start working? And we do. It's called Drawl Skin. So if we press tab to go back into object mode, tap X to delete, then let's press Shift C to recenter our cursor. Rather than doing all that process, we can just press Shift A to bring up our add menu, and under more, select Drawl Skin. And as soon as we do that, we can immediately begin extruding from this point. We're automatically switched to vertex point selection and to edit mode. Our object is set up with all the proper modifiers it needs and smooth shading and everything. So all you have to do is select Draw Skin, and then you can immediately press E to extrude and start working with the Draw Skin object. So a really awesome application that you can use is to create kind of rough character meshes. So let's go ahead and do that. I'll press tab to go into object mode, X to delete, Shift A, and under more here, add Draw Skin again. Press 1 to go into front view, and then press E to extrude. And what I'm going to do here is just kind of create a torso. So I'm going to hold middle mouse button to constrain this, press S to scale, E to extrude again, S to scale, E to extrude again, S to scale, E to extrude again, and so on. So I'm going to scale this out and press E to extrude and bring that down. Then let's press 3 to go into right view and scale this. And so this is going to be around where my neck is, so I'm going to press S to scale that and press 1 to go into front view. And so before I start extruding some arms out here, what I can do is actually add a mirror modifier to this, so I only have to create one side of it. So if I press Tab to go back into object mode and then tap Shift W, this will of course add my mirror modifier and put it up at the top of the stack for me. So now if we press Tab to go into edit mode and say select a point here and press E to extrude, then we can press S to scale this out like this and scale this point in some here and bring this up like this. And like I said, the mesh that's generated from all these points can get a bit complex, so you'll have to work with positioning and scaling these vertex points to really get the kind of results you're looking for. I would like there to be another point between here and here, so an easy way to do that is just to select the top point and then shift select this bottom point and then tap W to do a subdivision. And then we now have a subdivided point in there. So I have a little more mesh to work with this neck here and the head. And I'm going to do the same thing between here and here. And also, I'm going to close up my mirror options and my subsurface options so we can just see the skin here. Well, actually, before I subdivide this, I think I actually do have another point down here. Let's see. Yeah, it was just a little bit below this one. So rather than subdivide that, I'm going to double tap G, which whenever you double tap G in edit mode on something, it will do vertex, edge, or face slide, basically meaning that whatever selection of mesh you have, if you double tap G, then that selection will move along the adjacent line. So if I double tap G, then this will just move straight up and down this edge it's already connected to. So let's move it up to about right there. And so we can click on this bottom one and maybe scale it out some. And we'll click on that and scale it like this to scale it inwardly a little. I think actually I'm going to click and hold on my middle mouse to get it to constrain along this y-axis, because in the same way we can constrain a regular mesh, we can do this with objects we're using a skin modifier on as well. Although occasionally you won't always be able to constrain your scaling. I'm not entirely sure why, but it just happens sometimes with a skin modifier. I'm going to thin that neck up a little bit, maybe scale that out, move that up just a little. Also, occasionally you'll see that pieces of the mesh may not fully close in, like at the top of the head here, and that's not really a big deal. After you apply the skin modifier, it's real easy to patch something like that up. Let's go ahead and hop into front view to go ahead and finish this up. I'm going to select this shoulder point here, press G to grab, move it up here a bit, maybe scale it a little bit. Another thing you can do if you're having trouble getting your mesh to conform the way you want is you can adjust this branch smoothing value. And this doesn't affect your selection, this affects the entire object. When we talk about a branch when using this skin modifier, what we mean is any location where 3 or more edges are meeting. So really the only branch we have here is this point right here, because there's this edge, and this edge. This is in regards to how areas of the mesh where there's 3 or more edges will smooth out. So we can adjust that a bit, move this, press E to extrude, middle mouse to constrain, maybe scale this down. Yeah, that definitely needed to come down a bit there. C to extrude, S to scale this to give a little girth in this forearm here. S to scale again, and press E to extrude here. And this time, to kind of flatten out this palm of the hand, I'm going to hold S and then middle mouse to constrain to get this to constrain along the y-axis here. And I'm having a little trouble from this particular point of view, so I'm just going to tap X on my keyboard because for some reason I'm having a little trouble getting it to constrain. And then I'm going to press E to extrude again, S to scale, middle mouse to constrain. There we go. And bring that in a little bit. We could get in depth here and create a bunch of fingers and stuff as well, but for right now I'm just going to create a simple kind of little model here. Let's select this bottom point. I think this needs to be scaled in a bit and constrained along that axis. Just one to go into front view. I think those arms are a bit crazy. Let's do a border select across all this and just maybe bring this in a little bit, maybe bring that in a little bit as well. And notice we have this branch smoothing up really high, so I was actually trying to scale this point here where this is actually our only branch point that exists, and I wasn't really able to do it until I get really close in because the branch smoothing is set up so high. So if I were to lower that, I would have, more control over this here. So I just wanted to point that out. Okay, so let's press E to extrude here, S to scale this, and I'm going to make some kind of hip bone points. Press E to extrude this out, and we can move this around, S to scale here. So before we go any further, let's take a second to kind of go over these options here in the skin modifier. We talked about how a branch is any location where 3 or more edges are meeting, so actually we only have one branch point in this whole object right now, and that's right here. Because if you think about it, there's really no other vertex points where there's more than 2 edges coming out. The Mark Loose button will set anywhere you have a branch, which we actually only have one here. This will set whatever selection you have of branches to be loose, basically meaning that they won't change the shape of your object. Wherein you have, say, like a lot of branched points coming out of somewhere. The clear loose will just basically undo that marking you did. So say, for instance, our one branch here, right here, we were to mark this as loose. You'll notice as soon as we do that, this mesh changes. And then if I try to press S to scale it, then there's absolutely no change that happens here. But if we were to press clear loose, we have deform control over that point again. And then mark root here, this has 2 purposes. First of all, you may notice this create armature button here, which we can only use if we're in object mode. First of all, it will apply the skin modifier. That is, it will turn all this generated effective mesh here into an actual mesh of the object. And then secondly, it will create an armature, or that is a bone rig, out of the vertex points and edges we were using to control this skin modifier. Whatever point that we mark as the root bone, if we create an armature from this skin modifier, that point will serve as the head point to which all the other bones are parented to, and which you can kind of control the object. The other purpose of marking a root is that it serves as the origin point from which all the other points take their cues to be rotated. So if I were to select this center of gravity point here, which we would want to make our root if we were to create an armature from this, and as our center location of the object, then we'll see this circle come around it, letting us know that that's the root point there. So we'll go ahead and mark that and click on this knee here and press E to extrude, middle mouse to constrain, maybe scale this up a bit, E to extrude, scale that down a bit there, and we'll press E to extrude, and I'll actually need to scale this in some along the Y axis. I'll tap Y, get that to come in a little bit. And so this will be our heel, so let's press S to scale it, and press E to extrude that out. We can scale this down, G to grab, middle mouse to constrain, scale this out along the X axis here. And for some reason, when I'm trying to constrain by holding my middle mouse, it's just turning out to be especially difficult using the skin modifier. So I'm finding it better to just kind of click on these and tap the direction that I want to be constrained. So here we want the Y to constrain because I want to flatten that foot out a bit. Press E to extrude again, middle mouse to constrain. Press S to scale, tap Y again to bring that in a little bit like this. And let's shift select that and press 3 to go into right view, and let's bring this down some. And I think I'm going to select this heel bone point here and extrude a bit of a heel back here. Press S to scale that out. Okay, so there's several directions we can go after creating a little asset like this. But first of all, let's go ahead and save this. So we could go to File, click Save As, and I've already saved this as this Drawl Skin care.blend here. Hopefully by now you have bookmarked your library if you are using the library, and I hope you are because it's really helpful. So you could just click on that and choose a folder, make a folder, say, keep this in your examples folder or your tests. I'm keeping this in examples, and then just click Save as Blender file here. So we haven't discussed the basics of armatures and rigging, so I'm not expecting you to understand a lot about armatures and what makes a good armature. But I do want to point out that while it's really cool that this skin modifier can convert the edges and vertex points we're using to generate the mesh of it, it's cool that it can convert this into an armature, but it doesn't necessarily make us a very good one. For instance, right here in this forearm, where we use this point to give some meat to this forearm here, it's a great control point, but it's not going to really help us at being a kind of a bone joint. For really simple assets, like say you're making some creepy little hand or some kind of whimsical little character, or maybe even like an anthropomorphic tree or something that's got some personality or dancing or something, for those kind of simple instances, these armatures are really great. And also if you just, want a really quick example to see what an object will look like with some motion in it. So we could press tab to go into object mode, and we could press create armature. And this will both apply the skin modifier, that is, turn this all into like a regular mesh object that we can, do anything with, we can do with regular mesh objects, and create an armature for it. So we could click that, and once we do that, an armature is created. But, we forgot to first apply the mirror modifier, so the armature was only created for half of the object. So let's press Ctrl Z to undo that. And so first we would want to apply this mirror modifier, apply there. And now if we press tab to go into edit mode, we see that all the points that we had created on this right side are now official and existing, and everything on the left side as well. So yeah, a quick way to turn on auto IK, apply this, and to make sure your mirror modifier is applied so you don't accidentally forget or something, you can of course just either click to paint, or we could click on the sculpt button. And then as soon as we press make sculptable, we could then, begin sculpting our object here, add some more detail like this. Turn on X mirror brush here, and what have you. But the main thing that I wanted to show you that happened when we did that, if we click this button to go back into object mode, and I lower this value down because it's going to be a little difficult for this armature to work with the value up so high. The main thing that happened is that this skin's bones, which whatever we name this object, say we had created that skin object but then renamed it character or Benny or Jill or whatever, it would say Benny's bones or Jill's bones or whatever. But this armature is generated, so we could click the eye icon to display that. And then as soon as we click on that armature and switch this to pose mode, we'll see the mirror modifier was automatically applied for us in case we forgot to do that. Auto IK has also automatically been turned on for us. So this is kind of a quick little workflow to be able to create some, little assets for your scene or something like that. So if I were to drag and drop that file back in, we could just apply this rather than pressing create armature or going to sculpt or paint, which would also automatically create the armature and all that stuff. But first we'd want to hit tab to get back into object mode, apply that mirror modifier, and then apply the skin modifier. And now if we press tab to go into object mode, notice that our mesh is no longer defined by those simple points, but it is now its own full-on mesh, which we can edit and adjust and do anything we want to. And then from here we would want to create our own armature for this object, and once again we'll be getting into that in a future video. If you're doing something quite as involved as like a character, you would want to definitely create your own specific armature for that character. But if you're making some small asset or some kind of fun little thing, I'd like to show you real quickly just how fast that process can go with a Drawl Skin object. So I'll press tab to go into object mode, delete that, and I could press Shift A and under more, add a Drawl Skin object. And then of course we can immediately begin working on that. I could just press E to extrude, middle mouse to constrain. I'll go ahead and click on this point and mark it as root, and then maybe press S to scale it up, S to scale this point up, E to extrude this, and maybe make something like some kind of weird hand or something. So I could press 5 to go into top view, E to extrude this out, S to scale, E to extrude this out, S to scale, And we could go ahead and put a mirror modifier on this. Press tab to go back into object mode, shift W to add a mirror modifier. And maybe we're making some kind of claw or something like that. So we could extrude this out, press S to scale, extrude that out, and extrude this, S to scale, maybe bring these in a little bit, and adjust our branch smoothing some. Also here, it might help if we turn on clipping here too to get these points. Yeah, that gets this to merge a lot better, and then we can scale this however we like. So I don't know, maybe we got some kind of weird little salamander foot here or something. Maybe extrude another point out here. And this will just be the center. Say I've got some kind of little kind of hand or some kind of weird little thing like this. And maybe I'll add another point between here and here, so when this armature is created, it will rotate a little better. Tap W to subdivide between this point and this point. And then so we could immediately press our texture paint button, and we could start painting on this. Or whatever, who knows, whatever we were, really planning on doing here. And we could click on our object mode button to head back into object mode. And now where it says skins bones, we could turn on the visibility for that, select that from either the outliner or in the 3D view, and then switch this to pose mode. And we can immediately begin animating or, adjusting whatever kind of crazy little thing we made. So I could tap F to insert a keyframe there, press R to rotate this, G to grab. We grab one of these fingers. Press F again. Maybe rotate these out like this. And then, so you see just very quickly, we're able to, create something, paint it, or start sculpting it and start animating it. Hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you learned some cool stuff, and stay tuned for some more tutorials.